It looks like we have cameras rolling here, so we're going to go ahead and get started, guys. Hey, everyone. Welcome to MAGFest, and welcome to Gamers in History, a panel on board games throughout history. My name is Stephen Caruth. I'm going to be the main presenter here, and with me is...
I'm Autumn. I've done a few MAGFest presentations. If you went to that Donkey Kong Zen Buddhism one, that was me. I also did a really kind of serious one about video games as a fine art last year, but I was lazy this year, and I let this guy do all the work. So I got I made 2 slides. I'm really proud. Anyway.
I'm Holly Seneschal. I also did the video games as art presentation last year, and I was going to take a break this year, but somehow I've ended up here again. I have a script now.
You cannot escape.
As you might notice, the slide says it's by Stephen, Autumn, Holly, and Jean. Holly's here to take Jean's place because Jean wasn't able to make it up here, but she did a really good job on her portions, and we're really confident in Holly's ability to cover them. We're not so confident.
I'm afraid of how professional Jean's contribution was compared to mine.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and move on to the first slide here. So before we talk about specific games in history, we have to talk about what exactly a board game is. So a formal board game, which is what we're talking about here, requires ends and means. This is basically an objective, something that you're trying to do, and means or tools that you can use to do it. So for example, in chess, your objective, your ends, is to capture the king, and your means are your pawns, your rooks, your what-haves-yous. There are also we're going to make a differentiation here. We're going to be focusing on specifically positional games versus theme games. Now, positional games are games, there's a specific definition I want to read here, but it's complicated, so bear with me. They are played on a pattern of significant markings, such as an array of checkered squares or a network of lines and points whose purpose is to define the movements and positions of pieces in relation to one another. So basically, it has a bunch of squares on it, and the board is used to affect what the pieces can do and what they can't do. Board games also have objectives. We talked about that with ends. So those objectives tend to come into a couple categories, mainly time, location, and acquisition. Time being you have a certain number of rounds to do something. Location, you have to get somewhere. And acquisition, you need to get something. And finally, we're going to make a distinction here between traditional and proprietary games. Traditional games are brought up through sort of folklore customs, passed down through generations, word of mouth, that sort of thing. Proprietary is something someone invented and then later trademarked. We're mainly talking about traditional games here. So we're going to we split the games here into a couple different categories. First up, we have games of alignment or position. These are games where you need to get your pieces in a certain order. We're talking like tic-tac-toe here, or maybe like backgammon or something like that. War games are games that are meant to simulate battles. They are meant only in the abstract as metaphors. They're not meant to literally do that, but just stretch the same muscles that generals would use in those situations. Next, we have hunt games, which are asymmetrical, or games of many versus one. When you're playing these, imagine sort of like a bunch of foxes chasing a goose through a glen, or maybe some men on horses chasing a boar or something. And finally, we have race games, which are games where you're just trying to reach a certain square or area of the board with one piece. Yes.
I got 2 questions. Anybody know how to actually play backgammon? Weird. Oh my God, how? Okay. Secondly, do you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, go to the next slide.
What game do you think we're about to talk about?
Okay. So this part's Holly's here. I'm going to let her take it over, but we're going to talk about snakes and ladders and the game of life here.
Spoiled it.
Spoiler alert. So, snakes and ladders. Snakes and ladders is an excellent example of what's called a race game. So
into the mic.
So as a couple of examples, so for race games, they all share a certain set of characteristics. Each player is represented by a piece. Your goal is to finish the track from some starting point to an end point. The track itself usually has some kind of theme, such as an animal's body, like a snake or a goose, or be a more metaphysical example, such as like the cycle of reincarnation. There are special spots on the board that will move the player's pieces forward or back, and dice or lots are used to randomize movement. see, is the next slide yet?
It's the picture.
Yeah.
Okay, want to do that?
Yeah. Early gamers were obsessed with random chance, which that hasn't changed much.
Loot boxes.
Actually, go back. Sorry.
Go back. Wow.
I'll tell you.
It's like snakes and ladders.
I will control the slide deck from here.
Thank you, Steven. Thank you, Steven. So early gamers were obsessed with random chance. Up there, you see up in the top right corner an example of knuckle bones, which were an early form of dice that would be painted and carved down in order to generate random numbers. Those particular knuckle bones are from the Etruscan civilization in Italy that were used for divination in addition to gaming. These particular pieces are known as astrologi. They were pieces of leg or heel bone from various animals that had been modified or painted. You first see them around the Iron Age, about 1100 BC. Eventually, they turned into dice, which, yeah, you can see it there. Lots, when it comes to gaming, were any item used to randomize. So it could be those knuckle bones, but it could also be painted sticks that were smooth on one side and curved on the other. And those showed up basically everywhere. Now we can... So, and we'll get into some example of games that use these as a key feature of gameplay. The first example, now we go to the next slide. The first example of a race game we have today is Nyan Shapur, and it originated in India around the 13th century CE or AD. This is also the first game that we'll cover that has a morality theme. If you look up there, it'll probably look at least a little bit familiar to you. Just imagine that those parallel lines have rungs on them. This is an early version of Snakes and Ladders, or what would eventually become the published Snakes and Ladders we have today.
This version is still played in India, by the way. It's called Gyan Shapur.
Let's see. So in this version of the game, the snakes represent vices and the ladders virtues. The objective is to climb from the bottom of the board up to the top and achieve enlightenment to reach nirvana. Most of our examples of this particular game in history come from the 18th and 19th centuries, largely because these games are usually played on cloth, and cloth doesn't generally last a long time. A particular example is from the Himalayas around the 1800s. Published Snakes and Ladders that you're probably familiar with today appeared in England also around the late 19th century. There are a couple of variations on it. Like I've seen variations where it uses slides instead of snakes and bridges instead of ladders. Western Europe and the United States really loved games that featured morality lessons. And this in our next game would lead to a new genre of morality games. Okay. Here's the board. So, that's our example of morality of games. So now we're looking at an example of the Royal Game of Goose.
Anybody play Goose Game? This was the original.
This is the original Goose Game.
It sucks.
No, so this was invented in Western Europe around
1598.
1598, where it was first introduced as a gift to Francisco de Medici. No, sorry, it was a gift to to Francesco de Medici from Philip of Spain. This was a big game with noblemen, and they loved to gamble on it.
So the board we have an example is from the late 1700s. It's lost its the track's direct resemblance to a goose, but still maintains that circle coiling in on itself shape from first to last square, with themes squared in between that cause the player to move back, forward, or stay on the square until another event happened. There were a lot of variations on the theme for this game, but the rules stayed consistent. But a couple of rules did stay consistent. The players used dice or other means to randomize their movement on a board of 63 squares, and the goal is to get to the final title with an exact roll. Landing on so there are a couple of different effects, like certain spaces will cause you to roll again. Some spaces you land on and you lose a turn, or you have to stay there until another player passes you or lands on you. What's really fun about this one, fun is that when you get to the last space, one, there's death, which sends you all the way back to the beginning. But if you overshoot the last square, you can either, depending on the variation you're playing, start going backwards, back towards that death space I mentioned earlier, or you just go back to the beginning anyway.
It's like Uno. Some people play worse than others.
We go to the start point.
Talk about the Stamp Act.
I am going to talk about the Stamp Act. I
Some
love
stupid stuff.
I would love to hear about the Stamp Act.
Something
So-
about morality.
the game. Yeah, speaking of morality, this game, which was remember used to be a gambling game, used dice. The Stamp Act of 1765 put a tax on the use of cards and dice. Fun stuff. Those exclusions on dice eventually got rolled back, but
You said rolled. I don't think she realized what she did.
We reacting to the pun here? Okay.
yeah.
Keep
we're
going,
reacting
girl,
to the
keep
pun.
going.
We're rolled back, but tish. In the meantime, however, for a brief period of time, people use something called a teetotum, a sort of die with a spinning top included. Do you go to the next slide real quick? Because I don't feel like trying to describe. It's that thing.
Are you
It's that
familiar
thing.
with this from the Game of Life?
I play this game every day.
I think you guys can see where we're going with this. I think you can see what Goose eventually becomes. Uh-oh. It's still bad today.
Yeah.
I like Life. Okay, I played that as a kid. That was fun.
You don't play life. Life happens to you, just
Yeah,
like real
I learned
life.
my lessons early. Okay.
So, what's fun about this is that this kind of brings race games full circle back to what they were originally conceived of, which is as morality games. So you start at morality games, you go to gambling, and then you return to morality games. There's probably a lesson in there, but I haven't learned it. Let's see. So
I rolled a 3, and now I have 4 kids.
I wanna bring up the name of a game that was created in transition between Goose and the Game of Life here. So Goose eventually ends up splitting out into several different games, most of which don't last for a long time. We have one called Mansions of Happiness that was really big in the 1800s, late 1800s. But this is my favorite one that they brought up in the book because it is quite frankly insane. So from 1791, we have a game very similar to Goose called The Royal Genealogical Pastime of the Sovereigns of England from the Dissolution of the Saxon Heptarchy to the reign of His Present Majesty George III. This was a game that people played for fun in 1791.
God save the king.
It played like Candyland.
Don't
It's
give
called
George too
that,
much credit.
and it's played like Candyland. People had too much time.
they had no taste.
Is it time for other race games?
Let's
Yeah.
see. So
we might-
this is an old. Hey, we're gonna. Do you want to talk about the mansions of
No, I just covered that.
happiness?
All right, so we're going to move on to a couple other race games here. Just this is going to be a bit of a lightning round, so apologies if we don't explain it well,
It's
but we're
okay.
going to go quick.
I'm ready. All right, so y'all remember how we talked about how you need a board to play a board game? Wrong. This one was done in the sand. It's called Hyena. Basically, if anyone's like me, and your mom's telling you to go to bed, you play this game. Because basically, you start at the top with the 1, 2, 3, 4. You go around the spiral because it's like 3 a.m. Your mom's thirsty and she's got to go to the kitchen.
You're playing as your own mother, to be clear.
Yeah, and once she gets her drink in the kitchen, a hyena spawns at the start of the board. And as your mom makes her way back, if the hyena lands on the space, she gets 8. The hyena eats your mom.
Who is also you?
Who's going to bed now?
Yeah, it's not. It was Egyptian. By the way, it was common practice if the hyena ate your mother to mock that person because a hyena just ate their mother.
You lost your mom.
Yeah,
Loser.
mock them. Mock the
All right,
motherless
this
child.
absolute nightmarish thing will make total sense.
This is my favorite one.
If you want to understand what it's like to learn an Eastern board game, here it is. This one is basically you start as a normal citizen who wants to move up the ranks of bureaucratic politics. There are no 2 boards that are the same, and they all look like this as you work your way up through bureaucracy to become the best bureaucrat you can be. It really says a lot about society, I think.
It's also a lot of fun because the rules aren't actually real. You can if you want to move from one rank to another, you can make an argument to the other players that you should totally be allowed to do it. And if they agree with you, you can just do that.
I think that's how they do taxes.
You can just do whatever you want on these boards.
That's not how they do taxes. This is not a
Don't
financial.
do tax
this is not
fraud.
a financial advice panel.
This
We
one
do
is like
not
a
know how to do
religious
taxes.
text, if you're ready. It's called Lucis Kakis, or Arabic astronomy chess. It's played with 7 people on a 7-sided board with 7 pieces, and you try to align your pieces like the planets. You get points based on that. It's kind of wild.
This one gets a little historically confusing because Los Escaques in Spanish means chess. So this is also called chess, but we will be talking about real chess later.
This is fake chess. Anyway, what else is big?
All right, so here we are. This is we're going to be talking about space games next, but in particular, space games. Space games are where you try to control or acquire a certain territory on the board within a certain given time limit. So, but we're going to be specifically talking about the space game. That's right, Go. Okay, so Go starts as Weiqi in China. It's created around 2500 BC. And it's accredited to the Chinese Emperor Yao. However, most scholars believe that it was originally used as a divination boards, the black and white pieces representing different parts of the heaven, and you would put them down on the board, and their arrangement would tell you what your future would be. But like all future-telling devices, it's turned into a game because we're sickos or something. So this is the oldest game on Earth. So as I said, it's Weiqi in 2500 BC, and it spreads out and becomes Baduk in, I believe, Thailand, and then Go in Japan. But Go is introduced to Japan in like the 1st century or something. So we've been playing that same version of this game since then. Rules have hardly changed. There's no other game like it on Earth. So eventually Weiqi, as I said, is introduced to the Japanese shogunate, and they take to it like fish in water. They find it very intellectual, meditative, and sort of representational of their way of life. And noblemen start picking it up, clergymen, Buddhist monks, all sorts of people start playing it. Even commoners begin making their own board. It gets to the point where you could become a professional Go player in Japan, and that's still something you can do today. You can go to school and become a professional Go player.
The original esport.
It gets so big that there are yearly demonstrations at the Shogunate Castle. These are called castle demonstrations, and basically they would have 2 pro players of Go sit out and play a game a couple of days beforehand, and then play the game, like rehearse it out in front of the emperor in these demonstrations. And that was just to save time, because the emperor didn't have time for them to think of their moves while he's watching them. So the big Go organization in Japan during the Shogunate era is the Hoensha. However, that is dissolved at the end of the Shogunate and becomes the Nihon Kansei and Ki-in. And just show of hands, how many people know how to play Go?
Let's go, Go heads.
Okay,
Let's go.
we got a lot of good Go head players here. So I'm gonna not risk describing how to play because I learned from the book. But a couple of things that are worth pointing out. Strategy does develop for the game, and it's conceived into 3 sort of phases: Fuseki, Chuban-sen, and Yosei, which is the beginning, middle, and end. And it's generally noted that over time a handicap was developed for black, who goes first. So if you play black, white will generally get a 5-point advantage over you. So you have to win by more than 5 points if you're black. I just want to shout out some homies here who are so cool. These are guys that I was reading the history of Go, and I was like, these are really inspiring. So first we got Kibi Daijin. This guy introduced Weiqi to Japan in 735 AD, as I said, 1st century. This guy, he went over to the friggin', I don't know how to talk about centuries.
He went from China to Japan.
Yeah. He brought a Weiqi set to the emperor. This becomes Go. Next up, we have Nichiren. This guy beat a 9-year-old student in Go so bad, he decided he wanted to become history. And guess what? It's the first recorded history of Go match we ever have. He is also the founder of the Nichiren Buddhism school. So again, a Buddhist monk just whipped this 9-year-old boy and was like, I have to write this down.
Beat my little cousin in Street Fighter. Let's go.
And finally, we have Nikai the Goat, Honinbo Sansa. This guy is like the first everything Go player. He's the first professional Go player. He won the first ever Go tournament in Japan, which was organized by a student. He founded the first Go Academy, Godokoro, and he was Nobunaga's Go teacher. He was his meijin, as it were. Okay, so we got a couple Go-like games here that we're going to go through very quickly. We got Reversi, which was invented in 1883 by the British, but traveled to Japan, where it really became the board game we know today. Reversi is played a lot like Go, except you place pieces diagonally to each other, and if you capture enemy pieces by encircling them diagonally. I know that's a little hard to picture, but
they weren't smart enough for Go, so they made this.
Yeah. Very similar to Go, we have Ming Ming from Tibet, which is played like Reversi, where you're capturing pieces diagonally, except your pieces all start along the edges of the board like this, and you move them, you just slide them along the board to any open space. And this is the children, I think we all know this. We all played this in elementary school. I don't remember the rules, but it's a classic.
How do you know? Okay, whatever. I love this game.
I did not play this in elementary school.
Autumn
I
can
don't know
explain
what
it
they're
if
talking
she wants, but...
No, you just take turns drawing lines, and if you make a square, you get it and draw another line. It's easy.
That's
Anyway,
dumb.
what's
This
a real good boy?
This is Sergeant Stubby. I got too excited when I was making this presentation, and I saw this boy, and I was like, we got to talk about him.
Correct.
So I've got maybe a minute. This is Sergeant Stubby. He lived for 10 years. He was a bull terrier mutt. He served 18 months in World War I and 17 battles, 4 offensives. He is the only dog in history to reach the rank of sergeant, and he's the most decorated dog in American U.S. history. And he was originally, just this mutt that the people were training around the camp for basic training for military stuff. They smuggled him on board because they loved him so much. And when the commanding officer saw him, he said, "That can't be here." And then the dog saluted him, and he said, "Never mind. Yes, it can."
Real American heroes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay. So, next up, so we're talking about war games, not Sergeant Stubby. I'm so sorry. I got distracted and worked up.
Do not be sorry about Sergeant Stubby.
So war games, as I said, are where you are 2 enemy armies facing off each other. You're playing out an abstract battle, and the objective is generally to capture one or all of the enemy pieces. And when we're talking about this, we're all thinking about it. Chess, I can't believe I didn't edit this slide.
That's a lot.
Okay. So, chess comes from India. It first shows up there as chaturanga. And we know this because the Persians tell us so. They tell this really cool story about an Indian vizier who comes to the Persian kingdom, and he brings with him a gift for the king or emperor of Persia. And he says, it's a board with beautiful carved pieces. And he says to the emperor of Persia, if you can figure out what these pieces are for when you play them on this board, we will give you a good amount of treasure from India. But if you don't, you owe us treasure. This was like a bet of some sort they were setting up. So the king sets about trying to figure out how to play the game. He doesn't know he's trying to play chess. He can't figure it out. But his vizier is watching the whole time and studies the game at night when the king isn't playing it. And he figures it out. So when the Indian vizier comes back and he's like, hey, did you figure out my little game? The king's like, no. And the Persian vizier goes, actually I did. And proceeds to just run the board with the Indian vizier in a game of chess. Now, the Persian vizier, feeling a little slighted by this whole exchange, says, now I have a challenge for you. I have made a little game of my own, and now you have to play my game. And if you can't figure it out, it's double or nothing, baby. So the Indian vizier is like, okay, I just showed you the smartest game in the world. I can figure this out. And he proceeds to not figure it out in the timeline. And the game that the Persian vizier showed him was backgammon.
I told you it was weird if you knew how to play.
I really like this story because it kind of seems it seems like the Persians thought backgammon was going to go off. They thought this was the better game to chess, and wrong. No one knows how to play that crap.
Wow. We next slide in it.
Yeah. Nope, no, we're not yet. So, anyways, so that's how we get chess from India and chaturanga. So chaturanga goes to from India to Persia and becomes chaturang, and it goes from Persia to Arabia and becomes shatranj. It also spreads eastern and becomes a couple other games. It becomes zhangqi in China and spreads from China to become shogi in Japan. So European chess and shogi and zhangqi all come from the same place, this Indian game of chaturanga. Might have been a game before that, we're not sure. But anyways, back on European chess. So shatranj really explodes and takes off with the Islam after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And during the Crusades, a lot of European people in the area pick up the game of shatranj and bring it to Western Europe, where it becomes chess. So it's not just quite chess as we knew it today. It more closely resembled the Arabic game at the time. There was no castling. Pawns could only move one space. The queen could only move one space. It was a much slower game. But chess became really popular in Europe. It was a game of common people. And we saw this in China and Japan as well. More so than Go, zhangqi, shogi was the game of the people, and it was the same for chess in Western Europe. So knights would go around with chess sets, and they would carry rule sets with them that explained different ways they wanted to play chess to make the game faster or just more fun or interesting. And some of these rules eventually become adopted and become what we know as modern chess in 1490. And what I'm talking about is the rules of pawns moving two spaces, the queen moving as much as she wants except for moving as a knight, and castling. Those are all introduced in 1490, become modern chess. Okay, and we're going to go through some pictures of the chess sets here. I'm going to try to touch on some details. So this is a chaturanga set. This is how they would have played it. As you can see, it's got elephants and different stuff. It's played much like chess, but with different rules. This is an interesting variant called chaturanga forehand chess. 4 people played this, 1 for each army, and they would roll dice to determine where they would move their which piece they would be moving that turn. A lot of scholars thought this was actually the original basis for chess. They're wrong. Just one Western guy went to India and played this version and said, that's where that comes from. This is a shatranj board, just as we talked about. As you can see, it's very similar to what we think of chess nowadays. But as I said, it's a much slower game. So now looking at the Western or the Eastern variants, we go into zhangqi in China here. You can see this became a much different game. So you see the little square with the diagonals at the bottom of the board, that's called the palace. The king in this version of the game is not allowed to leave the palace. He can only move to points within it, but he can move in any direction he wants. It's the same with the queen, or what's called his advisor. The advisor cannot leave there. In the middle of the board, that one square line, that is called the river. Only certain pieces are allowed to cross the river. Other pieces are not. And pawns, when they reach the far end of the board, of course, get promoted. All right, guess what? I have so much more chess. Okay, this is shogi. So this is very similar to the Chinese version, except it doesn't have the river or the palace. And when pieces reach the opposite end of the board, they get promoted. If you capture a piece in shogi, you put it basically in your reserve, and you may play it on the board as a turn. So the more of your opponent's pieces you capture, the more pieces you get. This is Sichuan, Burmese chess. I didn't figure out how to play this one. It's wild. Makruk, Thai chess. This is played very similar to the Chinese zhangqi. Also didn't figure this one out. And this is Changi. This is the Korean version of chess. Again, it's extremely similar to the zhangqi. You can even see the river and the palace. So there you go.
Everyone takes from China.
Yeah, it's worth noting, by the way, Changi, Zhangki, Shogi all played in big ways nowadays. There is a professional Shogi alliance in Japan, just as there's a professional Go alliance. There are academies you can go to learn it. They scout kids when they're like 12, and they're like, guess what? You're just going to play this for the rest of your life.
I hope you like it.
You better like it, because you're really good at it. But yeah, it's really interesting to see how these games have really become such a staple of culture in those Eastern societies.
Oh shoot, it's my turn. Okay, finally, I've arrived. They chased me here. So we got chase games. These games are basically defined by what one player has a single piece, the other player has a bunch of little pieces, and they're trying to chase you. One of the most well-known ones is Fox and Geese. You can see that in the top right. You got one marble, that's the fox. And then the other marbles, they could be geese, they could be hunters and hounds. Their whole thing is they're trying to surround the fox while the fox essentially takes the pieces. The one in the bottom right is a Japanese variant. I think it's called 16 Soldiers. Basically, there's a samurai general in the middle and 16 villainous samurai that must take down the one general. And the general wins if he takes all the others down or gets into that right side, which is the fortress. Many variations of this evolved because people played this game for children, and like even today, they just nerd emoji like, actually, the fox should lose every single time if it played perfectly, so it's kind of easy. So they made variations such as like you get 2 foxes or there's more geese. This is another one that started in like Africa and Arabia and then eventually came to the Europe, and they're like, oh, this is our game now. We have Hala Tafel, which we will talk about in the next slide. One of the cooler ones I liked was Maharaja at the bottom. It's basically a chessboard, but one person just has their queen, and the queen can also move like a knight, so they get a little buff, but then they have to take away every other piece on the other person's side of the board. But that one went away too, because then someone nerd emoji'd that and said, the queen should lose every time. Anyway, we got Tafel. There's a little bit of an etymology debate because it's Icelandic and Scandinavian, and some people are like, oh, well, actually it's pronounced tabul or tapol. So I'm going to say tafel because I don't want anyone to be happy. So we see this in Scandinavia, and you'd think with a name like tabel, topple, tafel, that they'd set this down and play it like a human being. But these boards actually had 2 handles on them, and essentially you'd stand there holding one, and then the other person would stand there holding the other, and you'd hold up the table together, and you use your other hand to move your pieces like some kind of freak. So this is basically influenced by chess. There's a million different versions. There's no distinct one that everyone played. They were all different. If you want to have an idea, if you look at the picture, the king is the red piece, and the goal is to have a clear way to the edge of the board on 2 sides. So the black pieces are essentially trying to take out white pieces and get to the king, and the white pieces are just trying to clear a path. This is another one where losers were like, well, the king should lose every time. And yeah, we hate them. So the second chess came to Europe, though, and really blew up, nobody played Tafel. They could sit down and play a game. Why would you play this and stand? I can't believe it. So yeah, those are my 2 slides. Thank you.
So I figured it'd be fun if we could just do a little takeaway from this, because one thing I really noticed while we were going through this, none of these games were invented by Europeans. They were all invented by other countries. The only game I found that was invented by Europeans was Goose. And as we've established, that game is horrendous. It's awful. You roll dice and then you move a piece. It's brain dead.
Don't say that about Candyland.
I will say that about Candyland.
No.
Candyland is for 3-year-olds, and it shows.
That's what you do.
Shut up. And I'm sorry if I'm coming down very hard on this, but everything that we hold up, I always thought of chess as this big intellectual game that people in London and Russia played. But guess what? It's not ours. We got it from someone else. So I thought that was pretty cool. I also thought it was pretty cool how many of these games were just made by people in their homes and played by just common folk. Again, these were not gate-kept to the elite, rich, and wealthy. People were drawing boards in sands, making dice from hand-carved wood. I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah, shout outs to Gene for also pointing out you can basically print and make your own boards for any of these really for free. So if you're like, oh, I want to try TOEFL and hold up with my friend this board for losers, and maybe it'll be fun. I don't know. I've never played. But my takeaway is that people need to stop taking children's games, trying to make them more complicated, and just play Go. Go's got everything. It's hard. It's complicated. You can play it forever and never be good at it. Like, why are you trying to make the children's game hard?
Yeah, you know what? We got a little time here. I'm gonna try to explain Go. I'm feeling so brave. I'm so dog.
No.
I got this. You got.
What about Holly's takeaway? You overtook her.
Oh, that's right.
He's been doing that the whole presentation. It's been great. So a quick note on printing out your own board games for those. Board Game Geek actually has rules for some of the older games. Like specifically on it has a variation of the Game of Life on there. So if you want to go check that out, go to Board Game Geek and look at that, and also look at other games that are good on Board Game Geek.
Like Life.
And Twilight Imperium,
No,
3rd edition.
No.
Yeah, I got one woo. I got one.
Okay.
One woo.
We got some. So basically, the book we used for this was David Parlett's Oxford History of Board Games. It's right here if you want to take a look at it.
It's extremely dry.
But I want to give a shout out to my friend Seb, who's in Seb. Stop
you
looking
better
at your
stand
phone.
up and get off of your phone.
Up.
Yeah.
All right, this is my friend Seb. He made the PowerPoint. Seb had a few words they wanted to say about their world record title, so I'm going to let them.
Wait, what?
I should still have the world record, but my last run was disqualified because of inappropriate use of the term bionicle for a throwbot. I'm still
World record of
that.
what?
PowerPoint.
Oh, PowerPoint. Duh.
Yeah,
I'm so stupid.
PowerPoint world record. Don't
All
you
right.
remember?
I think we have a stupid. No, yeah. This is the next panel. Anybody likes pets, right? Yeah.
All right, so so we're pretty much done here. Unless you want to see me take a cut at explain and go.
Don't
Go back.
Don't look at that one.
Don't look at it.
Don't
You
look
can
at it.
see. It shows you a
can't
preview.
see
Okay.
it.
Anyway.
Anybody have any questions? Open to the floor now.
True.
Oh, I see you way back there. No.
Let's go.
Okay,
No.
let's go to the board game. So basically, you got red and white pieces. You can place them anywhere on the board. Like, there's no like chess. Where you
Black
have to
goes
go
first. Why did you say red?
Dog.
I'm gonna turn off
It's
your mic.
famously black and white. You cannot.
Essentially,
I have the
what you're
soundboard.
trying to do is surround the other player's pieces to capture them for points. Now, you have to surround them on their 4 like vertical and horizontal sides. So it gets complicated because you can just keep extending your size, right? Like black can keep moving, make it longer. So it becomes a game of trying to overtake them to force them to not make their piece bigger while trying to also make sure they're not eventually going to encroach upon your pieces. It's very much a back and forth game. It rules. I am terrible at it, but if you want to really, I know when I got into it, you can get a computer version of it that's really good and analyzes your play for $500 on Steam. So,
What?
yeah, if you wanna become a real Go player and
Real Go
understand how far AI has come, it costs $500 for an AI that can play Go well.
Why does it cost
Because
$5?
Go is hard.
So for some visual demonstration,
Oh no.
Autumn's talking about when she says cutting off the pieces for to escape. So you can see this piece right here. This would be considered to have 4 routes of escape because it has 4 lines leading from it. This piece right here would be considered to have 2. If white were to cut off both routes of escape for this piece, it would be considered capture. But because it's part of this black group and 6 is touching 8, which still has its routes of escape, it's not captured. If they were to capture this whole segment, then these pieces would be considered captured. Now, there's also an additional step in here called the rule of code. Because in Go, there are situations you can create where you are just recursively trading back and forth captures. The rule of code says if you're in a situation like that, you have to go somewhere else for one turn. You cannot just sit and trade movement like that recursively. If you start doing that, someone just has to go somewhere else.
Very cool, Stephen. Thank you. All right, so that's how you play Go. I also highly recommend, like, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, like, on the phone, you can also get, like, little Go puzzles. Like, they're called Life and Death, where it's basically, like, you get 1 or 2 moves and you try to save your pieces and make them uncapturable. That's what I played a bit, and it's pretty fun once you get the hang of it. Any other questions?
Is that also $500?
No, that one's actually free because they're puzzles. They don't need to think. Also, yes, you, the cute person in the front row.
Wait, who?
It's you.
David.
So you guys covered a lot of like traditional games, and in some cases they became like a trademark game later, like the game of life. But at what point did we start seeing games that were originally made as like a trademark thing that would be like mass produced?
So David is asking, basically, we saw throughout this presentation that traditional board games eventually become copyrighted and become proprietary board games, much like, you know, Goose starts off as just this thing that people are making to gamble on, and then someone's like, I'm going to copyright that, and that's how we get the game of life, right? So when do we start seeing just proprietary games come up? Pretty much at the exact time we invented the copyright. Just like as soon as it happens. People were creating theme games, detective games, Clue, stuff like that.
Monopoly.
As soon as we had just a huge money-making opportunity.
Good question. Oh, yes, you.
Two-parter, I guess. How many of these games can you play in space? And if you're not sure, which one do you think would be most fun to play in space? On the ISS.
Okay, actually, let's just go through and let's talk about which ones we want to play in space.
Our top
Every single
10
one.
games
Every
to
single
play
one.
in space.
Okay, okay, we're starting with Knucklebones. Not going to work in
Bad.
space.
You
Bad.
go up and down in this game. That's not real.
Can't go.
Not going to work. Okay, so we
Magnets
got
are fake.
Gashapur, this one, also not going to work.
Can't
Wait,
put
wait.
pieces
Oh, I
on
got
it.
it. I got
Can't
the
place
answer.
pieces on
It's
it.
Go.
No gravity. There's no
There's
gravity.
too many pieces.
They're magnetic.
I
have a magnetic
Magnets
board.
aren't real.
You can go get some magnets.
We have like 5 problems with what both of you are saying, but I'm gonna say, okay, so Gyaran Shapur, this is not gonna work. Goose, I wouldn't play that in space. I wouldn't play it on. I would
not play it on a boat. I would not play it with a boat.
I would try to fire a gun in space before I tried to play this game.
I think they've actually
And
done that,
to be clear, it would be harder to fire a gun in space. I'll take that risk. It could kill me. I don't
I'd play
care.
Life in Space.
I would not.
It reminds me of home.
Yeah, life I think would actually work out pretty well because it's got the T totem there. It's attached to the board.
No, life is the same as Goose. Life
think about
and
all the
Goose
little
belong
pegs.
to the
All the pegs
category
are
of
flying around.
bad
Where are my
games.
kids?
I mean, I'm just saying objectively. I'm thinking I'm off the cuff here.
Also, the little teetotaler would come spinning off the top.
No.
There's no gravity.
It's
all
being
right.
held in by the spinner
Are you
thing
about
that
to say magnets to me, Ben?
No, it's literally like it latches in. Have you not played Life before?
It does latch in. It latches Holly.
I've seen it.
that-
I've
that-
seen
that thing in the
come
center
off,
of the-
so-
Let's just keep
whatever.
going. Yo, this is it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the
No,
one.
we got to
go
talk.
back.
Hyena. This
No,
one's.
This
Give it
one.
to Hyena.
This
No,
one in
no.
space.
This one we have to talk. This one because you can only
You
play
did
this one
this.
drawn in sand. You could play this on the moon. That would be sick. Could you
Yeah,
imagine playing
but they
Hyena
said
on the
the
moon? Dog eats your money
ISS.
out?
They said the ISS.
The ISS.
Not
Well,
the
you
moon.
can. They have sand there too. Okay, you
No,
can
they
talk about
don't.
Anyways,
Anyway, we did it. I hope that answers your question. I'm
That
so
one.
sorry.
this is the one you would play in space.
Yeah.
This. No, this is objectively the one you would play in space.
Yes. Yes. You're right. You're right. You just need a pen and paper.
You just need a pen and
my
paper.
Gosh. All right.
And they already make pens that write in space. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Any other questions? Oh, yes, you.
So you said that Goose was a gift from Francesco Medici to the King of Spain. Do you think that was a political insult because the game sucked so bad?
Yes.
No.
No, you know how like gamers
He
love.
loved it.
Do you know gotcha games? It was the original gotcha game.
No.
And he was like, "Yo, I'm rolling all day, every day. I need to get that new Genshin character."
I need you to imagine that when people were playing this game, it was like 15 to 30 people watching like 6 guys go around this board, and they were placing bets on. The bets were literally just like, oh, is this guy gonna go to the well? Is he gonna?
They're watching him open up CS:GO skins. That's what it is.
Is he gonna go to the maze? Like, is he gonna win? Is he gonna overshoot home and gonna land on death? They would just gamble on this. And I guess we still do this today with like craps and stuff, but it boggles my mind that someone would be sitting around and watching a guy like playing Candyland. He's like, uh-oh, don't land in the gumdrop forest.
No,
I have 2-1 on that or
Dog,
something.
I've been on Twitch.tv long enough. There's probably someone streaming that, and there are gambling channel points on how well they play Candyland. That's real.
That's crazy.
If that's not real, I'm gonna make it real.
I've seen gambles for how long is the streamer's pee break gonna take.
That's different. That's funny.
But yeah, does that answer your question? Awesome. Any other? Oh, yes, right up front.
So were any of the games you talked about today not evil games?
The anonymous stranger there asks, who we do not know,
He seems very
asks
cool.
if any
Yeah, he
games that
does.
we discussed were not positional, and pretty much no. Most of these all can be related back to positional. As you start getting into the modern era of game, they become closer and closer to the theme games. Like, I think a lot of people would consider this a theme game, but it is positional. It is a race game. As much as I hate to
Talk
give
about
any
it. Acknowledge its
legitimacy.
existence.
I think the other thing to understand is video games concepts developed slowly. Like with the fox and the geese game, it was considered a huge revolution where instead of getting next to the fox, you jumped over the piece. That was new game. That was insane. That was complicated.
Yeah, you got to imagine, it's the same thing with like the chess varietals too. If you moved a pawn 2 spaces in like when you were playing chess against some peasant who had never done that before, you blew their mind. They would sit there for like an hour and be like,
No, you can't do
what
that.
does this mean for me?
You can't
what,
do that.
What can I do?
Show me the rule book.
Like, as they started like introducing patch notes for these games, like even though they seem really small from our perspective, they were ground shaking at the time.
I wish I could be there
Good
to hear
question.
the rule arguments about.
That's
whether
what
or
I'm
not
saying. Like,
chess pawns.
show
can
me
move
the
2
chess
spaces
rule book. You
forward.
can't do that. Everyone's played with that person.
Somebody
or me
with-
sometimes.
Oh.
Anyway. Yes, yeah.
Would you say that modern board games like Warhammer and games like that involve chess, or do those evolve separately?
So those are a separate thing. So those are interesting because I think by the classification terms in the book, I know they seem like war games, but they would actually consider those theme games, just because of
They're
how the
about
mechanics
the
work.
theme.
Yeah, exactly. What you're representing there isn't necessarily like abstract or positional enough. So, what am I trying to say?
I don't know. What
I
are
don't
you
know
trying
either.
to say?
I've
They're
got-
theme games is what he said.
Yes, they're coming from a different place, is what I'm trying to say. I would actually be very interested to look into the history of that kind of stuff. I learned a lot doing this, and I'm really curious about those other branches. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
Most of those games date back, trace the roots back to a game called King of Prussia.
King of Prussia.
King of Prussia? Okay, so just so everyone can hear that, we've got feedback from the audience that those games all trace back to a game called King of Prussia.
Is he referencing them all? Is that real? Who knows? We'll have to look it out.
Mm-hmm.
Also, mystery person up front.
How about card games?
Card games are not board games. Next question.
Yeah, you need a deck of cards, not a board of cards.
So this is something kind of worth talking about. In the purview of the book we read and most academics, I know this is like sort of what's the word I'm looking for, where it's like difficult, pedantic. But in order for it to be a board game, it did have to have a board. It had to be played on a surface. And again, when we're talking about that, that comes back to the positional versus the theme stuff we're talking about, where the fact that the board has those markings that represent where the pieces are supposed to go and how they're supposed to move, that's a large part of what makes it a board game, and more importantly, a positional board game.
Another? Anybody else have questions? Oh, okay, I guess we're getting, yeah.
How about board games with cards?
Board games with cards?
Yeah, like Candy.
You're literally describing. You just said a board game with cards, not a card.
So
game.
what kind of card do you? Hey, Holly, can you give him a mic?
No, do not give this person a mic.
Holly, can you just stand up and give them a mic?
more than I trust Steven.
Okay. They're asking about board games with cards. Yeah, they're board games. Whatever. Next question.
Yeah, easy. Yes.
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 Actually, that was one of the games we considered covering. Nine Men's Morris or Merrill's. That would be, I believe that's
It's a
space game. Yeah, it's a space game.
Yeah, honestly, if it says anything, we have 37 slides right now. We had to cut a lot of games.
We had a lot we wanted to talk about, and
So
an
just
hour.
if there's a game you love that we didn't cover, just think, oh, they loved that game. We just didn't get time to cover it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's Goose.
We did cover.
We
Goose.
wanted to do a special cutout for Goose. I feel like it has such an outsized cultural impact for what it
Being
is.
garbage and bad.
I
If
like a
you
little
take
gamble.
anything away from this panel, please take away that
They're all going to play Goose now.
they're all going to play Goose.
I want to play Goose now.
No,
There's no way it's as bad as you say.
You like playing Uno.
Here.
Uno is the blood sport of card games, okay?
There are literally drinking rules for Goose. Like, look at this. If you land on the tavern, it's typically on 19. Pay a stake for your drink, and miss 2 turns, sometimes 3, because you're drinking.
Yo, chug. Yeah, no, this is just a fun little party game. All right.
Goblet. Usually on 61. Pay a stake for tasting and missed a turn. Just like a little...
Why did you make that noise into a microphone?
I don't know. It was like instinctual, which is like kind of frightening.
I had to do it. It was on my bingo card for the weekend.
What? Whoa, you gotta show me that.
Yeah, I
anyway, any real questions?
Or fake questions?
Yeah, do you want to just like harass us? We're down.
Yep. No harassment?
Okay, cool.
These
Thank you
people
so
are-
much. That was really nice of you guys.
Yeah,
All right.
y'all had some really great questions,
Yes.
actually.
Thank you so much for coming out. We had a great time. I hope you all learned a lot. Have a good MAGFest, everybody.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.